Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans. So we enter Christmas week, and I've got a Christmas message for you that you'll hear straight after this. But first I wanted to tell you the true story of Cinderella, also known as the Little Glass Slipper. Now, we all love the idea of a person who suddenly, and perhaps unexpectedly, gets the recognition that they deserve, especially after a period of darkness and of abandonment and of misery. This is known as the Cinderella story. And it's when somebody rises from misfortune to reach the very highest echelons of society. But please note, it's not just a good thing that happens to somebody nice. The term has been misconstrued and misused a little bit recently. In a real Cinderella story, the nice person has to be overlooked and undervalued and mistreated to make it a true Cinderella story. Now, the tale we know, the Disney tale, is probably derived from the 17th century story known as Cenerentola, which was published in one of the earliest collections of Italian short stories. She has an evil stepmother and stepsisters. There's a missing slipper, and although this is a very dark story, it is probably the one which kicks off all of the rest of the fairy tales. In the Cenerentola story, she's forced to marry the prince. It wasn't a choice that she wanted to make, and there are 6 evil stepsisters. 60 years after the Italian version, the story of Cenerentola was adapted by Charles Perrault, who I talked about last week. He's the French writer and the father of the modern fairy tale. His story was titled Cendrillon and introduced the glass slipper and the pumpkin and the fairy godmother. And it was this version that the Grimm brothers later turned into Aschenputtel, which is English for Cinderella. And although in their tale, which was of course adapted quite a few years after the Perrault version, the heroine's slippers are made of gold and not glass, and when the prince comes to test the size of the stepsister's feet, one of the stepsisters cuts off her own toes to make her foot slide inside the shoe. And the stepsisters later on serve as bridesmaids at Cinderella's wedding, and the pigeons that Cinderella befriended while she worked in the kitchens in bondage, they came down to peck out the eyes of the stepsisters. So quite a macabre version of the tale that we love. But the earliest known rags to riches Cinderella story is likely to be true, and it's that of an ancient Greek lady named Rhodopis, or Dorica, D-O-R-I-C-H-A, Dorica. Now, Dorica was a companion, and those of you who are fans of the Firefly TV series will know what a companion is, but basically a companion is a high-class, very highly educated, very, very beautiful pleasure courtesan. Now, the most highly valued of these would be extremely well refined. They'd be very classy. And although they wouldn't actually be slaves, they did tend to be managed by one powerful man or one powerful family. In the Firefly TV series, the companion in that, she lives on board the spacecraft, and she could call on a powerful man, like, for example, the captain of the spacecraft, if she got into any difficulty. Anyway, the famous Greek storyteller and fabler Aesop, who lived around about 560 BC, is said to have loved Dorica. And this was while they both belonged to a slave owner on the Greek island of Samos. So we know that Aesop existed, and he talked about his love for Dorica, the companion. But unfortunately they became separated when she got taken to a permanent Greek colony in Egypt, where she met the brother of another famous poet, this time Sappho. And in fact, Sappho wrote stories about her, so we know she existed, and we know she went to the Greek colony. And for a time she worked in the kitchens of a noble lord there, where she cleaned out the ashes of the cooking fires. And we guess this is probably because she is being punished by the lady of the house, because normally a companion wouldn't be treated like that. A companion wouldn't be working in a kitchen. A companion would be in the study or in the music room or in the lounge. Anyway, one day the king of Egypt passed by their villa and he saw her bathing in some clean waters, perhaps washing away the ashes. And presumably he assumed that given her beauty and given where she was bathing, in other words, inside the private gardens of a very expensive villa, that she must be the lady of the house. Now, according to the story, an eagle took up one of Dorica's sandals while she bathed, and this eagle flew with it all the way to Memphis and then dropped it onto the lap of the Egyptian king just as he was about to do some of his legal stuff. Impressed by this curious event and by the exquisite beauty of the sandal that now lay in his lap, he decided not to rest until he'd found out who the beautiful owner of the beautiful shoe was. He sent out his men to test against all the feet in the realm, and when they eventually discovered that the shoe originally belonged to the beautiful companion, the one he'd seen bathing, then he couldn't believe his luck. And he wasn't put off by the fact that she was a mere servant or a mere companion, because a companion was a very valuable asset, a very valuable person in society. So he paid a great bounty to her guardian, and then he made her his queen. Clearly, this story became very popular across the classical world because it dared to suggest that anyone, even a cleaning servant and even a prostitute, could become a queen one day. And I like the fact that this original story, or part history, has many parallels with the ideas of the Cinderella motifs in Pretty Woman, the feature film that was starring Julia Roberts. That's a true Cinderella story, and that is the real story behind our modern day fairy tale. The true story of Cinderella. Where is Christmas? This year, for the first time in several years, many of us cannot share the same kind of Christmas that we've become used to. But that doesn't mean that Christmas has to be a location. Christmas is an idea, not a place. The nativity story, as described by the Gospel writers, Luke and Matthew, takes place at Bethlehem, a city that was named after an Akkadian deity known as Lamu, Lahmu, which means Mother Star. Beth, by the way, means house. So this ancient city is also the home of the Mother Star. Akkadian beliefs predate Christianity by about 2,000 years. And interestingly, near the birthplace of the baby Christ was a grove considered sacred as the site of Tammuz, Tammuz, an ancient Mesopotamian god associated with shepherds. St. Jerome wrote about this grove in the 4th century. Tammuz, also known as Dumuzid, Dumuzid, was frequently depicted in Sumerian art as a feathery, multicoloured, bird-like creature. Was this an angel? And this bird-like creature was seen talking to shepherds in the groves near Bethlehem. Now, please note that this legend dates back to around about 2300 BC. In other words, 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. The Greek equivalent of Tammuz, or Damuzid by the way, is Adonis. And he was known as the Lord by his followers. And he's known by people who are interested in this sort of thing as the archetypal God who dies and rises again. In 326, the Empress Helen, consort of the Emperor Constantius I, and he was the Caesar who died in Great Britain at York, made a pilgrimage to Syria and Palestine, and in the course of her excursions she visited the ruins of Bethlehem. Following her instructions, the Church of the Nativity was built over a cave where Jesus was supposedly born. If you go there now, you'll see the modern version of the Church of Nativity, but it's still over the cave that was found by Empress Helen. And that, in a way, put an end to the speculation about the birthplace of Christ. The Apostle Paul, though, saw the birth of Jesus as an event of great cosmic importance that brought about a new man who might repair the damage caused by the fall of the first man, Adam. Thus, the humble nativity of Jesus became a point of departure for cosmic Christology, where the birth, just like the life and the resurrection of Jesus, would have universal implications. And if the cosmic plan of the nativity was the salvation of all humanity, then we must ask ourselves, where is Christmas? Where is Christmas? For example, Christmas is celebrated each year on the International Space Station whilst it's in orbit around Earth. And it's celebrated by a crew that comes from around the world and by their families and ground personnel on Earth who share in their experiences. The space station crew has free time according to their respective culture and religion and faith and ethnicity. And for example, the Russian Orthodox Church tends to celebrate Christmas according to the Julian calendar, while the Catholic Church and Protestant denominations tend to use the Gregorian calendar. So crew members celebrate more than just one Christmas aboard the space station. They take their Christmas into space. Where is Christmas? During the Great War, 100,000 German and British soldiers crossed from their trenches and into no man's land to exchange seasonal gifts. And in some areas of the front line, men from both sides ventured into that no man's land zone on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day to exchange food and, we believe, to play football. Those soldiers had their Christmas in the trenches. But where is Christmas? And of course, many people spend their holy night in solitude. Monks and prisoners, for example, in their cells, but also other imprisoned people too. People who are innocent, and yet they're still confined. And of course, their guardians, and military men and military women on duty around the world, protecting us, and refugees and captives, and hostages and explorers, and caregivers and maintenance people, and security guards, and lookouts, and medical professionals, and hospital staff, and night workers, emergency call handlers, nighttime drivers, air crews, power engineers, lighthouse staff, seafarers, shipmates, circumnavigators, those forced from home, migrants, fugitives, pilgrims, missionaries, the homeless, the indigent, the itinerant, the sick, the outcast. Where do all these and many, many more have their Christmas? Where is Christmas? Xmas, E-X-M-A-S, might be for some all about the obsessive tidal wave of commercial activity and the accumulation of expensive indulgences, of hedonism, of revelry and of binge drinking. But for many others, Christmas is a simple reflection. It's a time of prayer and of quietness. It is a moment of devotion. It is the time of contemplation. So in other words, this Christmas I want you to take Christmas with you, like the people on the space station or like the people in the trenches. Take your Christmas with you in your heart. Because Christmas is where you are and Christmas is where you're going. This year, I wish that Christmas is with you. Enjoy your day, and please remember all those who might not be able to share it with others, and I'll speak to you in the new year. Happy Christmas!